There is a fuckload of stuff that has gone on that I want to comment on of various kinds, but I'm really busy today and I'm going away on weekends. There's no way in hell I can catch up while these topics are in any way relevant or current. So I'm just going to kind of rapid fire bullet point several things that have happened. Ready, set, go. Lauren Southern has been outed as a bit of a thot, apparently, sleeping with people in order to get ahead in her career or to get people to write things for her. I had time for Lauren Southern at the start of her career. I lost faith with her a great deal in the middle, and I've kind of come back around to thinking she might actually be a worthwhile person. Up until this happened, I disagree with her politics, but I always try to expose myself to people with whom I fundamentally disagree. And I think her documentary work, most recently, has been pretty good, even though I fundamentally disagree with a lot of what she says, a lot of what she does there. It's not too bad. But this has apparently all come out, and this whole trad wife idea, trad waifu, that I think she played off, has kind of fallen apart, and this kind of explains why she was taking a step back from everything, because all of this was about to drop. I think it's a bit unfair to be horrible to someone for using their talents, such as they are, to get ahead. And I also think it's hypocritical of a lot of people on the left who are kind of losing their minds over this, to stick the boot in and to upbraid her for doing what she did, because you wouldn't tolerate that against a woman on your side of the aisle. I guess it's still technically my side of the aisle too. You wouldn't do that. So hypocrisy always sticks in my craw, and it just feels like people are turning on her too easily because they feel betrayed, I guess, and then other people are turning on her more predictably but more hypocritically. Not to worry, I'm sure your trad waifu and your braid fetish can be met elsewhere. There's been a wave of bannings on YouTube of various channels with their videos being removed and so on. The most high profile of the most recent ones was Pigeon Speaks, though his channel appears to have been restored since, and a lot of innocent people have been caught up in the sweep, and not all of them have big channels, so that they don't have a lot of people to stand up for them, which is unfortunate for them. Yeah, the problem with free speech arguments is that most of the time, until it becomes incredibly egregious and wrong, you're sticking up for people who you won't necessarily like, people who have obnoxious or horrible or otherwise problematic or degenerate, depending on your political stripe, views. We're at that point where innocent people are getting caught up in this now, like history channels and so on, in this hysteria. But there are people like Pigeon Speaks who are genuinely borderline issues. I don't think he's ever called for any violence, but his views on gender, on race, and so on are despicable, and he's a conspiracy theorist. So he's kind of hovering on the borderline there. I think personally it would have been quite reasonable to keep him off YouTube, but I think that's going to be too much of a personal call. So we need hard and fast rules that people understand, and we need to not bow to hysteria, and we need to stand up for the free expression, even of people that we find repugnant and disgusting and beyond our personal pale. The only sensible metric is the harm principle. There's a lot of things that aggravate me, as you may have noticed if you're a long-time subscriber on the channel. I know I come across a lot angrier on the internet than I necessarily am in real life, and yeah, lots of people think I'm fairly chill on here. You rarely see me lose my temper, though you may have recently. But there are certain things, like hypocrisy, and like this other thing that I've encountered. So in the aftermath of all the fuss about UK Games Expo, various people are self-aggrandizing themselves, and one of the comparisons that they've made that I've noticed, especially with the fuss around Cyberpunk 2077 and its supposed transphobic content and everything, which is exactly the reverse of what they were intending. Nuance it's just completely lost on people, and there's a lot of this is the same crowd that makes a fuss about me or makes a fuss about tabletop RPGs in other ways, but they're comparing themselves to punk and saying that Cyberpunk 2020, Cyberpunk 2077, is transphobic or racist or sexist or whatever else. It's a dystopian future where everything is hyper-commercialized. Sexuality, gender, race, you name it. If there's a buck to be made off it in Cyberpunk, it's being done, right? It's hyper-capitalism with no restraints. It's a libertarian's wet dream in many ways, apart from the overarching power of the corporations, which of course is a natural consequence of that. But for these people to compare themselves to punks, or to hold Mike Pondsmith or the Cyberpunk creators in contempt, is just utterly absurd. I doubt many, if any of you, were alive even for the tail end of punk. Punks wore swastikas, and this was at a time where there were people who had actually survived the German death camps, where there were plenty of people who'd fought in World War II, still around, still involved in society, not doddering away in homes and so on. This was the 70s and the 80s that these people were around, and they wore swastikas then, right, as a gigantic fuck you to society, while, and this is important, while simultaneously keeping Nazis out of their clubs, right? Nazi punks fuck off. Ring any bells to anyone? They understood that the symbol only had the power that other people gave to it. They sought to be outrageous for outrageous sake. While there was a DIY aesthetic to it all, there was also the fact that the Sex Pistols were a commercial boy band, that Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood made and continue to make a huge amount of money off the back of punk, right? Johnny Rotten is selling butter. Punk isn't what you think it is, alright? It just isn't. And Cyberpunk has... To accuse Cyberpunk, and on the whole, the game, the background, all of it, of transphobia, this had a supplement based on When Gravity Fails in 1992, which was massively accepting of the trans community and went into quite strong detail in how you could change your character's gender and presentation and so on, and a background that incorporated and welcomed that, right? You're not punk. I'm punk, right? You're Tipper Gore, I'm Jello Biafra, and the internet is the Oprah show. And if you don't get that reference, look it up. The reason I'm so busy today, and have been all week and this weekend, is that it's the big end to our Iron Kingdoms campaign with my regular gaming group. We only meet about every month and a half, but this campaign has been going on for years at this point. I can't remember exactly how many that happens as you get older. But they kind of sprung it on me that they want this to be the last session. I had quite a bit more planned that hasn't been able to come to fruition, so there's a lot of loose threads. I hope I can bring it to an end in a good way, rather than in a sort of Game of Thrones finale sort of way, but it is going to be a bit rushed. Ending campaigns is always kind of bittersweet. You can look back and you can appreciate all the things you accomplished in terms of story and so on, and the enjoyment of the players and how the characters have developed, and all of that. But at the same time, it's coming to an end, you know, and that's difficult. And I've run a lot of long campaigns over the years. An SLA Industries campaign that climaxed in an attempted assassination of Mr. Slayer that was given away by a new player in the elevator on the way up to his office. Legend of the Five Rings campaign, where we ended up putting the head of the Mantis clan in as the new emperor. Yeah, there's been plenty of memorable campaigns, and hopefully once I spring what's been going on in the background the whole time we've been playing on people, it won't be too much of a disappointment. But it's a lot of pressure. And one thing I've taken on that I think other people might is I try to commemorate our adventures with a physical token, a physical item. So I'm going to give these guys the miniatures that I've painted for their characters as a memento of the campaign that we've played for several years. And then on to the next one. And we're playing Cyberpunk next year. 2020 in 2020. Zang.